happens in death, do they? These two things are not on the agenda, but it's very important. And to have this opportunity to learn more about how we can design the end of our life in an eco-friendly way is it's just such a glorious opportunity. So welcome everybody to this session. I'm not going to say any more here. I'm going to hand over to Ellie to give us the updates.
Thank you very much indeed. And a very warm welcome to Jean, who's going to be doing our talk later. And I don't know if we've got Catherine Guy Morell here, but she's our new member this month. Welcome to her if she is. No, I haven't seen her either. So I won't spend too long on the updates, but just to remind you that our summer school is forthcoming in May, so not long away, but it's now fully booked. So if anybody suddenly finds they're available to come, it's only a waiting list, I'm afraid. But we're getting excited about that.
Ellie, can I just add a little postscript there? And our U38 CEO, no, not CEO, chairman, Alan Walmsley, is actually coming to visit us on one of the days. He's very interested. And when I saw him on Wednesday at a board meeting, the first thing he said to me was, "Jenny, I want to apologise." And I'm thinking, what's going on here? He said, "I've been on a cruise."
Messages getting across.
we're making roads in here. We're making them feel guilty. Okay, sorry, I had to interrupt.
So if you haven't been able to book into the summer school, but you would like to meet up in person with some other people in this internet group, we are hoping to arrange something in September. So this is advance notice. We try to move all the way around the country for the meetups. And we've never been to Oxford before, and that seems to have quite good routes in from different parts of the country. So if you would like to hold the date, if anybody thinks they might like to do that, for Thursday, the 11th of September. So there's one for your diaries, 11th of September, Oxford, an in-person meetup. And it's quite nice to actually put a body to the faces that we see, and you get a lot of good just chats and a nice warm glow for being with like-minded people when we meet up. The other announcement I've got is that we're hoping to do a survey. We feel it's time to review the type of speakers that we've been having and to see if that's what you want, to find out if there's anything that you've been longing to have a talk on that we haven't yet provided, take your ideas for any speakers that you know are good. So that survey will come out in the next few weeks. So please do respond if you've got any views on the topics at all. Right. So I'm now going to hand over to Ian, who's going to do his wonderful news session for us.
Yeah, thank you, Ellie. I'll just share my screen. Seems to have lost the share screen. Seems to have disappeared.
Ellie, are Ian and Jean co-hosts?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. I must have minimized it or something. Yes, okay. So I'll do some. Morning, everyone. I'll do some just some news highlights. The CCC, which is the government advisory body, came out with a carbon budget, a 7 carbon budget, a couple of weeks ago, which basically tracks and advises the government how to get to net zero by 2050. It's an advisory body. It does have quite a good reputation.
Sorry, Ian. Ian, is it possible to have your slide on the full screen?
Yeah,
so, without your notes down the side, and then it's a bit larger. Thank you.
Is that better? Yeah.
Yeah, that's
so that is better. So the 7 carbon budget. So you can see the graph here. Hopefully you can see my pointer. You see the CO2 emissions coming down. They've come down about 40% since 1990. And the aim is to get to net zero by 2050, to get down to this point here. So the CCC have talked about this one between 2038 and 42, and basically advise the government how to do it. So what they're saying is, the right-hand graph here shows the actions that need to be taken in order to bring this carbon emissions down. And most of it is about electrification. In fact, almost all of it is about electrification of everything. So it's heat pumps, transport systems, buildings, heating, that sort of thing. That is seen as the big opportunity, to bring down these emissions. There's not much mention of hydrogen. Hydrogen was a big thing a few years ago, but I think that's kind of dropped down in importance because there's no hydrogen infrastructure. So people have realized that that one's actually quite difficult. And the new thing they've also added is a demand piece, which is about how we use electricity. And they're optimistically saying that people should use less. And I don't think that's actually going to happen, but that would be a sort of educational thing. So if you add all these things together, it does get us down to net zero by 2050. So the government just has to get on and do it, which of course is the hard bit. Anyway, let's mention that. So that was good. And in terms of the cost, I know the cost is about 50 billion a year to go green, to green all the sectors. Estimated costs, they're coming about 50 billion a year. So it's not astronomical, it's very affordable. And when people say it's not affordable, that's not true. It's coming out around about 50 billion a year. And then of course it drops off as we go forward. And the right hand shows, in fact, the operational cost of running a green infrastructure actually comes down. So the overall cost is not nearly as high as people think. So there's really no excuse in terms of cost. We just have to make it happen. So I think that was quite an interesting report. Just moving on, some other things. China is moving very quickly on green energy. Emissions in China are still increasing, so they're well behind the UK in terms of bringing the emissions down, but they should peak within the next 2 years, and they'll say they'll get to net zero by 2060. But they're putting massive investment into wind power, solar power, and so on, because they've got huge amounts of land available. So that they will. I'm feeling fairly confident they will get to net zero by 2060. Of course, they can do that because they're an authoritarian government. Anyway, they're moving ahead. Fossil fuel assets, the estimated 2.3 trillion US dollars of assets worldwide in the fossil fuel industry, and they are all at risk going forward. And this advisory body, this UK Sustainability Investment Association, is estimating that by 2040, these assets will be largely stranded and will fall in value as we move, to green energy. So hopefully that will motivate the investors to move their money across into the green industry. Let's hope so. Pylon compensation. The government's planning to go to 95% green energy by 2030, which means they have to put in lots and lots of pylons, lots and lots of new pylons to get the energy from A to B, particularly from the North Sea across the country. And people can object to the pylons, but if it's a critical infrastructure, the government can override their objections. But what it is doing, it's offering compensation, or it plans to offer compensation. So if you're near one of these big new pylons, and they will be massive, twice the size of existing ones, then you can apply for a sort of annual grant. So that will help them get around that problem. I thought that was quite a positive step. On the other hand, US is cutting its climate aid to third world countries. The previous government, US, were investing $11 billion in overseas climate aid. and Trump has pretty much cut that down to zero. That's very, very negative. China has introduced or plans to introduce a recycling policy, encourage people to recycle and back it up with money. So if you want to trade in an old vehicle, a China person can change in an old vehicle and get a grant towards buying a new EV, from BYD, which I think they're actively promoting recycling. And they're establishing a national recycling company in China, to take old goods, give money for them, and encourage people to buy new. So it does two things. It stimulates the Chinese industry, but it also goes green as well, because all the new products will be green. Well, most of them will be green products. So I saw that as a very positive step by China. Glacial melting. Unfortunately, the glaciers around the world are melting increasingly quickly. The rates of melting are increasing, and this threatens the food of about 2 billion people who use glacial water come through rivers. For example, in India, the two big rivers, the Ganges and the other one, both come from the glaciers in the Himalayas. So once they've melted, you won't get a steady flow of water in those rivers. You'll get, if it rains, you'll get massive amounts of water, and if it doesn't rain, there'll be zero water. So glacial retreat is not a good thing. And unfortunately, that's what climate change is going to produce. Well, it's beginning to produce it now. There was an announcement about a new UK forest, which I saw around between the Cotswolds and Mendip Hills near Bristol. They're going to plant a new forest over the next 30 years. Plant 6,000 acres, 20 million trees. That was good. And they reckon it'll absorb about 2.5 million tons of carbon each year. So that was planting a new forest. I think that's a good plan. And I think this is the last one. The UK is updating its climate plan, basically how it's going to get to net zero by 2050, because at the moment it's definitely too slow. We estimate they'll have to decrease their emissions 4.5% a year to get to net zero by 2050. And currently we're bringing down about 1.5% a year, about a third of the required rate. So the government has got to produce a new plan. They were meant to produce it by March, but they've been given permission to work on it a bit longer until October 25. But they will produce it. So that was that. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
If you have any questions for Ian, would you like to raise your electronic hand?
So it's a mix of good and bad news as usual.
John Yates.
Yes, two things then. First of all, just to say that I think Ian's updates are just wonderful, and every month I listen to them and I think this is just fantastic. The amount of work and the thought that's gone into it is really impressive and hugely appreciated by me, and I'm sure everyone else. So thank you, Ian. So my question was, and I mean, I'm new to this whole group, so I apologize if other people know the answer to this already, but is there any archive, or how can one access past months of your update? And secondly, is there any easy way of sharing it? Because I can think of a number of people who aren't a member of Climate Matters, but who I think would be interested, and I would share it with them if there was a simple way of doing that.
I think the past recordings are still on the website, I believe. It probably goes back about a year, 18 months or so. Who was looking after the website? Are they on the call?
Yes, on the recordings.
On the recordings,
on the website, including your excellent presentations, Ian.
Yeah. I've also keep the slides. I don't archive the slides. I've got about 3 months back editions of slides I could send to you, or if you like, John, if you'd like to see them.
I
But
would
you
like
can
to
access
call-
the recordings.
Yes, the thing about the recordings is that somehow having a few images and so on, you can attach to an email or other messaging, and it's immediate and people can see it. If there's a link that they've got to then go off and look at a recording, often the people just won't find the time to do that.
I think the slides are up there as well, aren't they?
Oh, are they? Oh, that'd be great.
Yes,
Yeah.
some of the slides are up, but I'll check and see, and if it's possible, we'll fill up the blanks.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
sometimes the monthly recording at that page on the website. There's also a link to the actual PDFs of Ian's presentation.
Mhm.
I'd need to check them, to be honest.
Well,
And
that's.
the
Well, just to
other
say
thing, John, is
that would be great if you could do that, because as I say, I think these are really valuable, and I would very much like to have a very simple way of sharing it with other people. Thank you.
just remember it is the news, so there's they do go out of date after a certain time. Helen.
I just wanted to ask a quick question about the sorry, my phone rang last time I had one. About the forest. I wanted to know, do we know who owns the land that the new forest is on?
I think that's a good question. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, I assumed it's public land,
Right.
because the government is mandating this.
Yes.
But I think we'd have to look into the details, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay.
There was an article on the BBC website, and that's got links onto it to other, so yeah.
On there,
Yeah.
might tell me.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If anybody finds out, please do put it in the WhatsApp group or the Facebook group page. Joe.
Yes, thank you, Ian. In the plans for more electrification by 2050, I would think tidal power should have a play by then, won't it?
Yeah, I think tidal streaming, like the River Mersey or the Bristol Channel, should be in place by then. But it's still only 1 or 2, 3 or 4%. It's a small bit. Yeah,
I mean,
part of it.
They've had success up in Orkney. I would hope they could reproduce that. I mean, it could be so good for the UK.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And Frank.
A couple of comments really, and then a question. One comment about the forest is 1 million trees planted doesn't mean 1 million trees unless there's a really good plan for maintenance of the trees when they're growing. Very often the best thing to do is let the forest grow for itself rather than try and plant it. But the maintenance is absolutely central. If you don't have maintenance, you won't get many trees planted surviving. That's the first one. In regard to tidal power, there is a very considerable problem of tidal power of silting up. It is not easy. It's not a simple observation. The question I want to ask Ian is, in looking at the carbon emissions, are we actually making sure they're not offshoring and offshoring carbon emissions to other countries?
Yes, that's a very good question. Obviously, some of it is offshore because we import goods, from China and so on and so forth. So what we're talking, I mean, a good proportion of it will be offshored. It's about 10-15%, something like that. And in the charts, it's only considering, I think it does mention offshoring, but it's mainly about the onshore. So yes, I think that's a very good point. But China, where a lot of the goods are coming from, is actually moving very quickly now. So but yeah, you're quite right. It's definitely a mix, but it's mainly what they show in the graphs is what we do ourselves. It does include our share of aircraft emissions, which really I see as the big problem, because sustainable fuel is not really that sustainable, to be honest. and long-term options like electric planes and hydrogen are probably 30 years away. So I think aircraft is increasingly a problem. Yeah.
Thank you, Heather, for adding some information to the chat as well. So at the end, you'll be able to save the chat and use that if you need to refer back to anything. I'm about to hand over to Brenda. So this is the section of the Zoom today where we don't use the chat at all, so that people can really concentrate. And if everybody could mute themselves as well, so that we don't have disturbance, that would be really kind. Brenda, over
Right,
to
thank
you.
you very much. Well, we're delighted today to welcome Jean. Her title of her talk is The Carbon Footprint of Your Final Journey. A little bit of background on Jean, who has been involved in the funeral industry for a long time now, over 30 years, and in fact has published her book, Time to Go. That was in 2004. And basically this dares people to be different, veering away from black and depressing funerals, but still honouring loss and grief in a deeply personal way. So in 2012, Jean was ordained as a One Spirit interfaith minister, and in 2013, she received the most significant contribution to the Understanding of Death award at the Good Funeral Awards. Jean has helped many people to pre-plan their funerals with a strong focus on the environmental impact of their final journey, both with planet and pocket in mind. Today, we are having a slightly different format. Instead of breakout groups, as Ellie said at the beginning, and there will be a much more sort of open, general Q&A session and discussion, which we will do our best to manage. We will ask you at that point to use your electronic hands, and then we get an idea of who's wanting to ask stuff and put things in the chat. And can I just reiterate what Ellie just said? Please don't use the chat whilst Jean is in the middle of her presentation. So it's over to you, Jean.
Do I share the screen now?
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jean, if you go to slideshow in the top row there, it'll bring and click on slideshow and view show, you'll get a full screen show. So to your right a bit more across to slideshow.
Now I've got there's a black bar there that isn't letting me underneath. What's happened?
Have you maximized your screen with the maximizing box up at the top right hand corner?
There's another way to do it. Going.
There you are. Right. Make it big again. Okay.
Maximize.
Yeah, you can minimize that one, Jean. That's for later. Okay, so where it says in blue, Last Wishes U3A, maximize that screen at the top where the cross and the box are. At the top, your top right.
Here, there's a bar that says this is being recorded and it won't let me behind there. Can I just click OK?
Yes.
Yeah, just click OK. Yeah.
Oh, Thank you. Okay. Slideshow.
Yeah, and then underneath there it'll say view, show, or from start, from current slide, just underneath.
My slideshow, yeah. And then what?
To the left of where you are, at the very far left, it says from beginning and a green arrow. Just click on there.
From beginning. Oh, here.
Yep.
Oh, thank goodness. Sorry about
yes.
Well
All
done.
anxiety is over, and breathe.
Oh, Malcolm.
Okay,
Oh.
over to you, Jean.
We've got there at last. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's a great privilege. And so Last Wishes is about bringing people's awareness to the many choices available when planning a funeral and knowing when to say yes and when to say no. The focus is on making ethical choices that don't cost the earth, and the sacredness of life and death, and the healing power of ceremony. We're all unique beings, so let us celebrate life in an equally unique and thoughtful way without compromising on choices or ethics. And funerals are very much about those left behind being comfortable with our arrangements. And it's a really good idea to check with those closest to you to see how they feel about your decisions. So your choice of body disposal, I'll let you read it and then I'll move on. It may be quite an eye-opener to you to read that the body must be disposed of in an appropriate manner and the necessary paperwork completed. Otherwise, your choices are as vivid as your imagination. So people think there's a lot of red tape involved, but there doesn't have to be. Now, embalming fluids, the process has changed considerably over the years. Today, embalming is sometimes referred to as hygienic or sanitary treatment, and it is extremely intrusive. The chemicals used are highly toxic to the embalmer and the environment. And the main reason for embalming is to make a dead person look lifelike and to delay the decaying process. But there are a few exceptions where embalming is necessary. If a body is to be laid in state for public viewing in an open coffin, if there's a long delay until the funeral, or if a body is to be repatriated. In our experience, most people we spoke to were unaware that they'd signed up for the procedure. So if you do not want your body to be embalmed, you need to make this very clear in your plans. So body donation, it's possible to donate your body to medical science. This is the most cost-effective method of body disposal. It's also a form of recycling and offers student doctors hands-on experience for work they will be undertaking. Medical schools can hold a body for up to 3 years, and at the end of which they arrange for cremation to take place that they pay for. There is no upper age limit about potential donors, but must be over the 17 years old. For a number of reasons, such as death at the weekend or a public holiday, a post-mortem examination, or certain medical conditions, the body may not be accepted. So it would be very wise to have a secondary plan in place. So here we are, cremation. It's thought to be, by some, to be one of the most environmentally friendly options. However, despite strict government legislation, cremation still causes harmful emissions. Carbon from the body is released into the atmosphere. Mercury from amalgam tooth fillings. Dioxins from plastics and glues. And on conventional coffins, carbon dioxide, furans, NOx, and other toxic and cancer-causing compounds are released into the atmosphere. Additionally, an enormous amount of fossil fuels are involved in the cremation incineration process. Should you choose to be cremated, here are a few steps you can make to have a more environmentally friendly departure. Insist on no embalming other than in specific circumstances. Check the coffin you choose does not contain solvent-based adhesives, or, better still, choose one made from natural materials. Always refuse coffins with gold or silver handles, as they are likely to be plastic. Dress or wrap the deceased in clothes or cloth made of natural materials, and certainly no synthetics. Instead of imported, if you want flowers, ask people to bring them from the garden, or locally grown blooms use locally grown blooms rather than those with a big carbon footprint. Always avoid oasis, because that contains formaldehyde, and ask that trees are planted to help offset any harmful emissions. And then our burial choices. Burial in a cemetery, burial in a churchyard, and direct burial, I guess you're all familiar with. But burial on a private land is possible. Should burial on private land be your choice, there are guidelines that must be followed. The owner of the private land can bury anyone they wish on their property. However, if too many people are buried, it may seem to the authorities that a cemetery has been established, but no money must change hands. You can be buried in your garden. It's similar to that regarding private land, but the consideration is that burial in your garden could affect the selling potential and the value of your estate. Access to the grave could be some problem in years to come if the property is sold. It is also possible that the new owners may wish to exhume the body. It is the vendor's responsibility to disclose the presence of a grave, records of the grave's position and details of the occupant should be passed on to any new owner. An agricultural land, a limited number of burials can take place on agricultural land, where the ground over the marked graves where the ground over the unmarked graves continues to be farmed. The same guidelines apply as to burial on private land, with no money changing hands and no change of use. And then there is burial at sea, but there are strict regulations that apply. And in bad weather, that can cause expensive and complicated situations. Such burials can only be carried out where there is no hazard to shipping, especially fishing boats. This is to prevent coffins getting tangled in trawlers' nets or being washed ashore. This is not an environmentally friendly choice. A more common alternative is to scatter ashes from the shore or from a small boat.